You ever heard a laugh that cuts deeper than a knife? The kind that doesn't just brush off your skin, but sinks into your bones and stays there? That's the laugh 12-year-old Jamal Carter heard the day Officer Dan Ridley smirked down at him and said, "Special Forces. Boy, your daddy's probably sitting in a jail cell somewhere." But here's the thing about life. It's got a way of humbling you at the worst possible moment. And Officer Ridley? He was about to learn that lesson the hard way. From which country are you enjoying this story? Please make sure to tell us in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Because this is just the beginning.
The park buzzed with the usual Saturday chaos. Kids sprinted across cracked pavement, their sneakers slapping against the asphalt in a rhythm as familiar as the distant hum of traffic. A basketball thumped erratically, punctuated by shouts and laughter. Jamal Carter sat on a rusted bench, his fingers working the frayed laces of his sneakers. He wasn't in a rush. The game could wait. Across the court, a shout cut through the noise, sharper than the rest. Two boys, Malik and Deshaun, stood chest to chest, their voices tight with a kind of tension that came from too much pride and too little space. The ball rolled forgotten near Jamal's feet. He sighed, standing. He knew how this went. By the time he reached them, Malik had shoved Deshaun hard enough to send him stumbling back. "Yo, chill." Jamal stepped between them, arms out. "It's just a game." Malik's lip curled. "Ain't your business, Jamal." Before Jamal could answer, a voice sliced through the air. "Break it up." Officer Dan Ridley moved through the crowd like a ship cutting through waves. His uniform crisp, his expression sharper. The kids parted without a word. Ridley's eyes locked onto Malik and Deshaun, then flicked to Jamal, still standing between them. His mouth twisted. "What, you the peacekeeper now?" Jamal dropped his arms but didn't step back. "Just trying to stop it before it gets stupid, sir." Ridley snorted. "Yeah, I bet." He jerked his chin at Malik and Deshaun. "You too. Hands where I can see 'em." Malik scowled but obeyed. Deshaun, though, tensed. "We ain't do nothing." Ridley's hand hovered near his belt. "That's so. Looked like assault to me." Jamal's stomach tightened. He'd seen this before. The way Ridley's voice got quieter when he was angrier. The way his fingers tapped against his hip like he was counting down to something. "Sir," Jamal said carefully, "it was just a shove. They're cool now." Ridley's gaze slid to him. "You their lawyer?" "No, sir. Just saying." For a second, the park held its breath. Then Ridley smirked. "Cute." He turned back to Malik and Deshaun. "Since your little friend here's so sure you've learned your lesson, how about you both sit your asses on that bench for the next hour? Think about how much fun it is to waste my time." Malik opened his mouth, but Jamal shot him a look. After a beat, Malik stomped to the bench, Deshaun trailing behind. Ridley watched them go, then turned to Jamal. "You always this brave?" Jamal met his eyes. "My dad taught me how to handle stuff like this." "Yeah." Ridley's grin didn't reach his eyes. "What's he, a security guard?" "Special Forces." The laugh that burst out of Ridley was loud enough to turn heads. "Oh hell. Special Forces." He shook his head, chuckling. "Which Special Forces?" "The kind that flips burgers at the back of McDonald's." A few kids snickered. Jamal's fingers curled into his palms, but his voice stayed steady. "Green Beret, sir. He's deployed right now." Ridley wiped imaginary tears from his eyes. "Sure, kid. And I'm the president." He leaned in, close enough for Jamal to smell the coffee on his breath. "Let me guess. Next you'll tell me he's got a secret medal from the president too, huh?" Jamal didn't blink. "No, sir. Just a silver star." Something flickered in Ridley's face. Irritation, maybe. He straightened, his voice going loud for the crowd. "Y'all hear this? Kid says his daddy's some war hero." He smirked. "Funny how none of you ever met him." The words hung in the air. Jamal's throat burned, but before he could speak, a new voice cut through the noise. "Problem here, officer?" The crowd stilled. Ridley turned, his smile fading as the sea of kids parted. A man stood at the edge of the court, his shadow long against the pavement. He wore fatigues, his sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and scars. Dog tags gleamed at his throat. His expression was calm, but his eyes, sharp as a blade, locked onto Ridley. Jamal's breath caught. "Dad!" For a heartbeat. No one moved. Then Ridley's face did something complicated, like his smirk had been yanked off by an invisible hand. The man, Sergeant Marcus Carter, took a single step forward. The kids nearby edged back instinctively. He didn't raise his voice. "You laughing at my son?" Ridley's mouth opened, closed. Marcus tilted his head, waiting. The park had never been so quiet. The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Officer Ridley's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. His fingers, which had been tapping against his belt, now hung limp at his sides. The confident swagger he'd carried just moments before seemed to deflate under Marcus Carter's steady gaze. Jamal watched his father's face. He'd seen that look before, the calm before the storm. It was the same expression Marcus wore when teaching Jamal how to handle a weapon, how to control his breathing, how to stay cool when everything in you wanted to explode. "Sir," Ridley finally managed, his voice cracking slightly before he cleared his throat. "I was just diffusing a situation here. Your boy was interfering with police business." Marcus didn't blink. He took another step forward, his combat boots crunching on the gravel. "My son was keeping 2 kids from fighting. That what you call police business these days?" A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some of the older kids exchanged glances. Malik, still sitting on the bench, straightened up, his eyes wide. Ridley's face flushed. "Look, Sergeant, I don't know what your boy told you, but he told me you laughed in his face when he said who his father was." Marcus's voice remained dangerously even. "That true?" The officer's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. His eyes darted around the park, searching for an escape route or maybe backup that wasn't coming. Jamal felt a strange mix of emotions swirling in his chest. Pride at his father's presence, embarrassment at the scene, but underneath it all, a simmering anger at how Ridley had treated him just moments before. Marcus moved closer, close enough that Ridley had to tilt his head back slightly to maintain eye contact. "Let me ask you something, officer. You know why I'm here? Why I'm not halfway around the world right now?" Ridley shook his head mutely. "Because my CO sent me home after 12 months in hell. Said I earned some time with my family." Marcus tapped the silver star pinned to his chest. "This? Got it pulling 3 wounded men out of a kill zone while taking fire. Not that I expect you to understand what that means." The crowd had grown larger now. Parents who'd been watching their kids play had drifted over, sensing the tension. A few had their phones out, recording discreetly. Ridley found his voice again. "Listen, I was just..." "You were just what?" Marcus cut him off. "Humiliating a child? Making assumptions based on the color of his skin? Tell me, officer, how many black men in this neighborhood have you assumed were criminals when they were actually veterans?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Jamal saw the moment it hit home. The way Ridley's shoulders hunched slightly, the way his fingers twitched at his sides. Then something unexpected happened. Marcus sighed, and when he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its edge. "You know what the real shame is? My son actually respects the uniform. Despite everything, despite all the times he's seen officers like you treat our community like a war zone, he still believes in what that badge is supposed to stand for." Jamal felt his throat tighten. He hadn't realized his father had noticed that about him. Marcus turned slightly, including the gathered crowd in his words now. "We got boys and girls from this very neighborhood serving right now. Some won't come home. Others will come back missing pieces of themselves. And the ones who do return whole? They deserve better than this." He turned back to Ridley, who looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to apologize to my son. Then you're going to think real hard about why you became a cop in the first place. And if that reason wasn't to serve and protect everyone." Marcus leaned in slightly. "Then you need to find another line of work." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the birds seemed to have stopped chirping. Ridley's mouth worked silently for a moment before he turned to Jamal. His face was pale now, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool afternoon air. I owe you an apology, son. That was Unprofessional of me. Jamal nodded stiffly, unsure what to say. The apology felt hollow, but the fact that it was happening at all was something. Marcus studied Ridley for a long moment, then gave a single nod. "We done here?" The officer nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. We're done." As Marcus turned to Jamal, the crowd finally began to disperse, conversations breaking out in hushed tones. Jamal could feel dozens of eyes on them as his father placed a hand on his shoulder. "Let's go home," Marcus said quietly. As they walked away, Jamal glanced back once. Ridley was still standing there, staring at the ground, his posture completely different from the swaggering cop who'd laughed in Jamal's face just minutes before. The car ride home was quiet at first. Jamal watched the familiar streets roll by, his mind racing. Finally he spoke. "Dad. Yeah, thanks. But you didn't have to do that." Marcus kept his eyes on the road, but Jamal saw his grip tighten slightly on the steering wheel. "Yeah, I did. Not just for you. For every kid back there who's been treated like they're less than they are." He glanced at Jamal. "You stood your ground. That's what matters." Jamal nodded, looking out the window again. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. He thought about Malik and Deshaun, about the other kids in the park, about the parents who'd been watching. Something had changed today. He wasn't sure what exactly, but he could feel it, like the first crack in a dam. The tires crunched over gravel as Marcus pulled into their driveway. The familiar white-paneled house with its peeling paint and sagging porch steps should have felt comforting, but Jamal's stomach remained in knots. He unbuckled his seatbelt slowly, watching his father's profile in the fading light. Marcus hadn't spoken since they left the park. His jaw set in that way Jamal knew meant he was turning something over in his mind. The front door creaked open before they reached it. Mama stood in the doorway, her arms crossed tight over her chest. The yellow glow from the hallway light behind her cast long shadows across the lawn. "There's a video going around Facebook," she said without preamble. Her voice had that particular calm that Jamal knew meant trouble. "My sister just called me. Said she saw my son and my husband in some kind of confrontation with police." Marcus sighed, running a hand over his close-cropped hair. "Let's get inside." The air in the living room felt thick. Jamal sank onto the worn couch while Marcus remained standing, pacing the length of the coffee table. Mama stayed by the doorway, her eyes darting between them. "Start talking," she said. Jamal opened his mouth, but Marcus spoke first. Officer Ridley was hassling some kids at the park. Jamal tried to intervene, and Ridley decided to make an example of him. Mama's eyes flashed. "What kind of example?" The words tumbled out of Jamal before he could stop them. "He laughed at me when I told him you were special forces. Said you were probably in jail or flipping burgers." The silence that followed was deafening. Mama's hand flew to her mouth. Marcus stopped pacing, his shoulders squaring. Then the house phone rang. Mama moved to answer it, her movements stiff. "Hello." A pause. "Yes, he's here." She held the receiver out to Marcus. "It's Colonel Hayes." Marcus's eyebrows shot up. He took the phone. "Sir." Jamal watched as his father's expression grew increasingly grim. "Yes, sir. I understand." "No, sir, I didn't intend." He pinched the bridge of his nose. "Of course. Tomorrow morning." "Yes, sir." When he hung up, Mama was already at his side. "What is it?" Marcus exhaled slowly. "The video's gone viral. Someone tagged the base in it. Colonel wants to see me first thing tomorrow." Mama's hand tightened on his arm. "Are you in trouble?" "I don't know." Marcus looked suddenly exhausted. Could be they're worried about optics. Active duty soldier confronting a police officer. Jamal's stomach dropped. "This is my fault." Both parents turned to him sharply. "No," Marcus said firmly. "This is that officer's fault, and the system that lets men like him think he can treat people however he wants." The phone rang again. Then Marcus's cell phone buzzed. Then Mama's. For the next hour, their small house felt like the center of a storm. Calls from relatives, from Marcus's army buddies, even from a local news reporter. Mama finally unplugged the landline while Marcus silenced his phone. Jamal sat frozen on the couch, his mind racing. He pulled out his own phone and opened Instagram. His feed was flooded with versions of the same video. Different angles, different captions, but all showing the same thing. Officer Ridley's mocking smirk dissolving under Marcus's quiet intensity. The comments were a mixed bag. Asterisk, that's how you handle racist cops. Asterisk. Asterisk, military dude needs to respect police authority. Asterisk. Asterisk, kid showed more restraint than I would have. Asterisk. Asterisk, this is why we need body cams. Asterisk. Mama sat down heavily next to Jamal, peering at his screen. She sucked in a breath. Lord have mercy. Marcus was staring out the front window, his reflection ghostly in the dark glass. We need to be prepared, he said quietly. This might get bigger. A knock at the door made them all jump. Through the curtain, Jamal could make out a silhouette on the porch, and the glowing red light of a news camera behind it. Mama stood abruptly. I'll handle this. She smoothed her shirt and schooled her face into a neutral expression before opening the door just enough to speak through the crack. Mrs. Carter? I'm Lisa Young with Channel 7 News. We'd like to get your family's side of. No comment, Mama said firmly. Please respect our privacy. She shut the door gently but definitively, then leaned her forehead against it. When she turned back to them, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. This is getting out of hand. Marcus pulled her into a hug. Over her shoulder, his eyes met Jamal's. In them, Jamal saw something that scared him more than any confrontation at the park. Uncertainty. His father, the unshakable Green Beret, didn't know what came next either. The weight of that realization settled over Jamal like a physical thing. Outside, the news van remained parked at their curb. Its satellite dish pointed toward the sky like some strange mechanical predator waiting to pounce. And in that moment, Jamal understood. Their quiet life before today was gone. Whatever happened next would change everything. The glare of morning sunlight through the kitchen windows did little to lift the heavy atmosphere in the Carter household. Jamal pushed scrambled eggs around his plate, the food growing cold as he watched his father methodically polish his dress shoes at the kitchen table. The rhythmic swipe of cloth against leather was the only sound in the room. Mama set a steaming cup of coffee in front of Marcus. You sure you don't want me to come with you? Marcus shook his head without looking up. Better if it's just me. Colonel Hayes won't appreciate making this into a spectacle. Jamal's fork clattered against his plate. What if the army? They won't court-martial me for defending my son, Marcus said, though the tightness around his eyes betrayed his own doubts. He finally looked up, meeting Jamal's gaze. But I need you to stay home from school today. With everything going on. I'm not hiding, Jamal interrupted, his voice firmer than he expected. Mama and Marcus exchanged a look. It was Mama who spoke first. Baby, it's not about hiding. It's about being smart. That video's everywhere. Reporters have been calling the school. Let them call, Jamal said, sitting up straighter. I didn't do anything wrong. You always taught me to stand up for what's right. He looked directly at his father. Isn't that what you did yesterday? Marcus's expression softened. He set down the shoe and reached across the table to grip Jamal's shoulder. You're right. But standing up doesn't always mean walking into the lion's den unprepared. He glanced at his watch. I've got to go. We'll talk more when I get back. The front door had barely closed behind Marcus when Jamal's phone buzzed. Malik, asterisk, dude, you see the news? They talking about you on Good Morning America. Asterisk. Jamal's stomach lurched. He opened the link Malik had sent. There, on national television, was a freeze frame of Officer Ridley laughing in his face. The cheering below read, Police mockery goes viral. When will law enforcement change? Mama's phone rang again. She glanced at the screen and sighed. Pastor Williams. She answered, her voice weary. Yes, we're all right. No, we don't want to make a statement. I understand, but... Jamal slipped out the back door, needing air. The morning chill bit at his arms, but he welcomed the sharpness of it. He sank onto the back porch steps, staring at the overgrown basketball hoop at the end of their driveway where he and his father had spent countless hours shooting around. His phone kept buzzing, texts from classmates, friend requests from strangers, even a message from someone claiming to be a talent agent. Jamal ignored them all, instead pulling up the video again. He watched as Officer Ridley's smug expression collapsed under his father's quiet authority. Watched as the crowd reacted. Watched himself standing tall despite the humiliation. A shadow fell across the screen. Jamal looked up to see Mrs. Reynolds from next door leaning over the fence, her floral housecoat flapping in the breeze. "Jamal Carter," she said, her voice carrying the weight of 70 years in their neighborhood. "You stirred up quite the hornet's nest, didn't you?" Jamal opened his mouth to apologize, but Mrs. Reynolds continued. "Good." She nodded sharply. "About time someone did. That Ridley boy's been trouble since he was knee-high, always picking on anyone smaller than him." She reached into her housecoat pocket and pulled out a folded newspaper. "Local paper wants to interview you. Told them to get lost until I checked with your mama." Jamal took the paper with trembling fingers. There, on the front page below the fold, was a photo from yesterday with the caption, "Local hero or hothead? Community divided over viral police confrontation." Mrs. Reynolds studied his face. "You scared?" Jamal swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am." "Smart boy." She patted his shoulder. "Scared means you understand what's at stake. Now go on inside before those vultures out front spot you." As Jamal retreated back into the house, he heard the distinct sound of tires on gravel. Peering through the front window, he saw a black SUV with government plates pull up behind the news van. Two men in crisp uniforms stepped out. Mama appeared at his side, her breath catching. "That's Colonel Hayes' car." Jamal's blood ran cold. Why would he come here? Dad just left to meet him. The doorbell rang. Mama squared her shoulders and moved to answer it. Jamal hovered behind her as she opened the door to reveal not just the colonel, but Marcus beside him, his face unreadable. Colonel Hayes removed his hat. "Mrs. Carter." "Jamal, may we come in?" The formality of the request sent a chill down Jamal's spine. Something was very wrong. As they stepped inside, Marcus finally met Jamal's eyes. The message in them was clear. "Brace yourself." The ticking of the living room clock seemed to grow louder as Colonel Hayes settled into the worn armchair across from the Carters. His uniform was immaculate, the ribbons on his chest telling the story of decades of service. Jamal sat stiffly beside his mother on the couch, his fingers digging into his knees. Marcus remained standing by the fireplace, his face a mask of military discipline, but Jamal noticed the way his father's thumb kept rubbing against his index finger, a nervous tell he'd had since childhood. Colonel Hayes cleared his throat. "First, let me say this isn't how I'd prefer to handle this situation." His eyes flicked to the front window where the news van was still visible. "But given the public nature of events, we need to move quickly." Mama's hand found Jamal's. Her palm was damp. "Move quickly on what exactly?" The colonel leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "The video has reached Pentagon leadership. This morning, I received calls from both the Secretary of the Army's office and the NAACP." He paused. "They want Sergeant Carter to participate in a press conference." Jamal blinked. "A press conference?" "To discuss police-community relations," the colonel clarified. "The administration sees this as a teachable moment." His gaze shifted to Marcus. "Assuming you're willing." The room fell silent. Jamal watched his father's jaw work as he processed the information. Finally, Marcus spoke. "With all due respect, sir, I'm not a politician. I'm a soldier. And right now, the Army needs soldiers who can bridge divides," the colonel countered. He pulled a folded paper from his inside pocket. "There's more." The police commissioner reached out. "Officer Ridley has been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation." A sharp breath escaped Mama's lips. Jamal felt something hot and vindictive flare in his chest, but it died just as quickly when he saw his father's reaction. Not triumph, but something closer to sorrow. Marcus took the paper, scanning it briefly before handing it back. "This isn't about one bad cop, sir. It's about the system that creates them." The colonel nodded. "Which is exactly why the White House wants to speak with you. They're proposing a task force, military and civilian law enforcement working together on community relations training." He hesitated. "They'd want you to help lead it." Mama's grip on Jamal's hand tightened to the point of pain. That would mean... Marcus trailed off. A reassignment. Extended stateside duty. The colonel's expression softened. And before you ask, yes, your family would relocate with you to D.C. Jamal's head spun. Washington. Leaving their home, his school, everything he'd ever known? He looked to his father, searching for some clue as to how to feel, but Marcus's face remained unreadable. The colonel stood, adjusting his hat. I'll give you all some time to discuss. The press conference is scheduled for 3 p.m. at the Armory. Carr will be here at 2:30, if you choose to participate. He moved toward the door, then paused. Marcus? However you decide, know that the army stands behind you. What happened to your son? It wasn't right. When the door closed behind him, the dam broke. You can't be seriously considering this, Mama said, her voice trembling. They want to use you, use our family, as some kind of political prop. Marcus finally sank into a chair, his shoulders slumping. Or it's a chance to actually change things, Layla. How many times have we complained about how things are? Now we might be able to do something about it. Jamal found his voice. What about your unit? Your team? His father's eyes grew distant. They'll deploy without me. The words hung heavy in the air. Mama stood abruptly, pacing to the window. And what about Jamal? You want to uproot him right now, in the middle of all this? I want to keep him safe. Marcus's sudden intensity made Jamal jump. You saw those reporters. This isn't going away. At least in D.C., we'd have resources. Protection. From what? Mama whirled to face him. Marcus met her gaze steadily. From whatever comes next. A knock at the door interrupted them. Jamal, grateful for the distraction, went to answer it, only to freeze when he saw who stood on their porch. Officer Ridley, out of uniform, his hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. His eyes were red-rimmed, his normally clean-shaven face shadowed with stubble. Jamal, he said, his voice rough. I came to apologize. Properly. Behind him, Jamal heard his father's chair scrape across the floor. The air in the Carter living room turned to ice. Jamal stood frozen in the doorway, his fingers gripping the doorframe as Officer Ridley shifted uncomfortably on the porch. The man who had seemed so large and intimidating at the park now looked diminished, his shoulders hunched, his gaze darting anywhere but at Jamal's face. Marcus appeared behind Jamal, his presence radiating tension. You've got some nerve showing up here. Ridley flinched but didn't retreat. I know, but I needed to say this in person. His throat worked as he swallowed. May I come in? Just for a minute. Mama's voice came from behind them, sharp as broken glass. Absolutely not. Jamal expected Ridley to leave then, but instead the officer did something unexpected. He reached into his jacket pocket slowly, pulling out a folded piece of paper. My resignation, he said, holding it out. Effective this morning. Before the department could fire me. Marcus took the paper, unfolding it with deliberate movements. His eyes scanned the contents before he looked back up at Ridley. Why? Because the video was bad enough, Ridley said, his voice cracking. But then I saw the security footage from the park cameras. The angle they didn't show online. His hands trembled slightly. The way I talked to your son. The things I assumed. He finally met Jamal's eyes. I became exactly what I swore I'd never be. A heavy silence settled over the porch. Somewhere down the street, a car door slammed. Marcus studied Ridley's face for a long moment before stepping aside. 5 minutes. The atmosphere in the living room was suffocating as Ridley sat perched on the very edge of the couch, his hands clasped between his knees. Jamal remained standing near his father, watching the man who had humiliated him just yesterday now struggle to find words. My brother served, Ridley blurted suddenly. 2 tours in Afghanistan. Marines. He rubbed his palms against his jeans. When I saw you in that uniform yesterday, Sergeant, it shook me. Because my brother came back to the same crap your son faces every day. And here I was, doling it out. Marcus crossed his arms. That's supposed to make it okay? No. Nothing makes it okay. Ridley looked up, his eyes glistening. But I wanted you to know. This isn't who I am. Or at least, it's not who I want to be. He turned to Jamal. I failed you. As an officer, as a man, as a human being. And I'm sorry. The raw sincerity in his voice made Jamal's chest tighten. He'd expected anger when facing Ridley again. Maybe even satisfaction at seeing him brought low. But this hollowed-out version of the cocky cop from the park, left him unsettled. Mama, who had been standing sentry by the kitchen doorway, spoke quietly. What happens now? Ridley shrugged. I don't know. Counseling, maybe. My brother's been after me to volunteer with his veteran outreach program. He stood abruptly. I won't take up any more of your time. I needed you to know the regret is real. As he moved toward the door, Jamal surprised himself by speaking. Officer Ridley? The man turned. That day at the park, you asked which special forces my dad was in. Jamal took a deep breath. He's part of the 1st Special Forces Group. They do civil affairs work, building schools, medical clinics, that kind of stuff. Ridley's face did something complicated. Thank you for telling me, he said softly. Then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. The silence that followed was broken by Marcus's phone buzzing. He pulled it from his pocket, glancing at the screen. Colonel Hayes. The press conference is still on. He looked at his family. We need to decide. Mama exhaled slowly. If we do this, if we go to Washington, we're stepping into the spotlight, Marcus finished. No turning back. Jamal thought about the video spreading across the internet, about Ridley's shattered expression, about the way his father had stood tall in the face of injustice. He thought about all the kids at school who would face their own Officer Ridleys tomorrow, and the day after that. He met his father's gaze. We should do it. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Yeah. Jamal straightened his shoulders, feeling something settle inside him. If we don't, who will? Mama reached for both their hands. The decision was made. Across town, the news crews were already setting up their cameras. The armory buzzed with controlled chaos. News vans from every major network lined the street outside, their satellite antennas piercing the sky like metallic spines. Inside, uniformed personnel moved with purpose, setting up microphones and adjusting camera angles. Jamal stood off to the side of the makeshift stage, watching as his father conferred quietly with Colonel Hayes near the podium. A young lieutenant approached Jamal, holding out a small earpiece. This will help you hear better once things get started. Jamal inserted the device, immediately catching snippets of overlapping conversations from the reporters now filing into the room. Biggest police reform story since Ferguson. White House confirmed the task force announcement. That's the kid from the video, over by the... He shifted uncomfortably under the sudden attention, grateful when Mama placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. Breathe, she murmured. Just focus on our family. Everything else is noise. Colonel Hayes stepped to the podium, tapping the microphone. The room fell silent. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming on such short notice. I'm Colonel Robert Hayes, commander of the 5th Military Police Battalion. His posture was ramrod straight, his voice carrying effortlessly. We're here today to address the incident that occurred yesterday at Lincoln Park, and to announce a new initiative between the United States Army and local law enforcement agencies. He continued, outlining the basics of the proposed Community Relations Task Force, but Jamal's attention was drawn to the side door where a group of uniformed police officers had entered, including Chief Morrison himself. The police chief's expression was unreadable as he took a seat in the front row. And now, Colonel Hayes said, I'd like to introduce Sergeant First Class Marcus Carter, who has graciously agreed to share his perspective. The applause was immediate as Marcus stepped forward. Jamal had seen his father brief generals and lead troops, but never like this, under the glare of national scrutiny. Yet Marcus carried himself with the same quiet confidence he had in the park. Thank you, Colonel. Marcus adjusted the microphone, his eyes scanning the crowd. 2 days ago, I returned home from deployment expecting to spend quiet time with my family. Instead, I found myself at the center of a national conversation about policing, race, and accountability. He paused, and in that silence Jamal could hear camera shutters clicking like insects. What happened to my son wasn't unique. It happens every day in neighborhoods across America. But because someone filmed it, because people shared it, we're having this discussion today. Marcus's grip on the podium tightened slightly. The question is, what do we do next? A reporter in the front row raised her hand. Sergeant Carter, do you believe Officer Ridley should be prosecuted? Marcus shook his head. This isn't about one officer. It's about systems that allow such behavior to persist. That's why I've agreed to consult on this new task force, to help bridge the divide between communities and those sworn to protect them. Chief Morrison stood abruptly. If I may. Colonel Hayes nodded, and the police chief stepped up to the podium beside Marcus. The tension in the room spiked. My officers serve this community with honor, Morrison began, his voice firm. But we're not perfect. When we fail, we must own it, and fix it. He turned slightly toward Marcus. Which is why my department fully supports this initiative. Effective immediately, we're implementing mandatory de-escalation training developed with military input. Jamal's eyebrows shot up. This wasn't in the script they'd discussed earlier. A murmur rippled through the press corps as Morrison continued. Furthermore, we'll be establishing civilian oversight committees with direct input from affected communities. He hesitated, then added, starting with a seat offered to Mrs. Layla Carter, should she accept. Mama's sharp intake of breath was audible even over the sudden surge of questions from reporters. Jamal turned to see her stunned expression, her fingers pressed to her lips. Marcus recovered first, leaning toward the microphone. That's the kind of substantive change this moment demands. Not just talk, action. The press conference continued, but Jamal's attention was drawn to movement at the back of the room. A familiar figure slipped in. Officer Ridley, now in civilian clothes, standing near the exit with his arms crossed. Their eyes met briefly, and to Jamal's surprise, Ridley gave a small, respectful nod before disappearing back out the door. As the event wrapped up, a White House aide handed Marcus a sealed envelope. Jamal watched his father's face as he read the contents, the slight widening of his eyes, the quick glance toward his family. Whatever was in that note, it would change everything. Again, the ride home was quiet, the weight of the day pressing down on them all. It wasn't until they were back in their kitchen, their sanctuary, that Marcus finally spoke. They want us in Washington tomorrow, he said quietly. The president wants to announce the task force personally. Mama sank into a chair. This is really happening. Jamal looked around their modest kitchen, the chipped paint, the crooked cabinet door that never quite closed right, the photos on the fridge documenting every stage of his life. All of it about to be left behind. His phone buzzed. Malik again. Asterisk, dude, you going to meet the president? Asterisk. Jamal stared at the message, the reality crashing over him in waves. 24 hours ago, he'd just been a kid at the park. Now he was part of something bigger than himself. The pre-dawn knock at their door came at 4:37 a.m. Jamal, who hadn't slept more than 20 minutes at a stretch, nearly tripped over his suitcase in the hallway as he rushed to answer it. Through the peephole, he saw two military police officers standing rigidly at attention, a black government-issue Suburban idling at the curb behind them. Sergeant Carter's residence? The taller officer asked when Jamal opened the door. Before Jamal could respond, Marcus appeared at his shoulder, already dressed in his service uniform, the silver star gleaming at his collar. We're ready. The ride to the airport passed in a blur of darkened streets and flashing police escorts. Jamal pressed his forehead against the cool window glass, watching his neighborhood slip away into the darkness. His phone buzzed constantly, texts from friends, social media notifications, news alerts, but he ignored them all. At the private airfield, a sleek jet waited on the tarmac, its engines whining softly. A woman in a crisp navy suit greeted them at the bottom of the stairs. Sergeant Carter? I'm Ellen Whitmore, Deputy Chief of Staff. The President asked me to personally oversee your travel arrangements. As they boarded, Jamal caught his mother's wide-eyed expression. Neither of them had ever flown before, let alone on a government jet with leather seats and a steward offering orange juice in crystal glasses. The flight passed in a surreal haze. Jamal dozed fitfully, waking occasionally to the murmur of his parents speaking quietly with Ms. Whitmore. Once, he caught snippets of conversation, legislative package tied to the initiative. And Senator Clayton may push back, before drifting off again. They touched down at Joint Base Andrews as the sun crested the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of pink and gold. Another motorcade waited, this one longer and more elaborate than the last. "Welcome to Washington," Ms. Whitmore said as the vehicle sped toward the city. The White House emerged suddenly at the end of Pennsylvania Avenue, its white columns glowing in the morning light. Jamal's breath caught. No amount of TV footage prepared you for seeing it in person. The sheer weight of history pressing down on those manicured lawns. They were ushered through security checks and down carpeted hallways, past portraits of presidents and into a small but elegant sitting room. "Wait here," Ms. Whitmore instructed. "The president will see you shortly." The moment the door closed, Mama rounded on Marcus. "You didn't tell me we were meeting him today." Marcus held up his hands. "I didn't know until we were on the plane. This is moving faster than anyone expected." A soft knock interrupted them. The door opened to reveal not the president, but a teenage girl, maybe 16 or 17, wearing jeans and a Georgetown sweatshirt. Her dark curls were pulled into a messy bun, and she carried a tablet in one hand. "Hi," she said with a warm smile. "I'm Leah. My dad asked me to keep you company until he's ready." It took Jamal a full 3 seconds to realize. This was the first daughter. Leah plopped onto the sofa beside Jamal like they were old friends. "So," she said, tapping her tablet, "you're kind of a big deal right now. Hashtag Jamal Carter is trending worldwide." She turned the screen toward him, showing a dizzying array of tweets and memes. Some supportive, some critical, many just plain bizarre. Jamal blinked. "People are making memes about me? Welcome to the Thunderdome," Leah said with a laugh. "Don't worry, most are positive. That one's my favorite." She pointed to an image comparing Jamal standing up to Officer Ridley with iconic civil rights figures. Before Jamal could process this, the door opened again. A tall man in a well-tailored suit entered, his presence instantly commanding the room. "Mr. President," Marcus said, snapping to attention. President Reynolds waved him off. "At ease, Sergeant. We're informal here." He crossed the room, shaking each of their hands in turn. When he reached Jamal, he paused. "Young man, you've started quite the conversation in this country." Jamal's mouth went dry. "I didn't mean to, sir." The president smiled. The best revolutions never start with intention, just conviction. He turned to Marcus. "Sergeant, we have 30 minutes before the press conference. Let's discuss how we're going to present this initiative." As the adults moved to a corner table, Leah nudged Jamal. "Come on, I'll give you the tour before the circus starts." She led him through hushed hallways, past startled aides, pointing out historical artifacts with a casual familiarity of someone who lived among them. "That's the Rose Garden," she said, pointing through a window, "where they'll do the announcement. And over there." A sudden commotion interrupted her. A group of aides hurried past, their voices tense. "Just confirmed, Senator Clayton is holding his own press conference at," saying the task force oversteps federal authority. Leah's smile faded. "Oh, that's not good." Jamal's stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" "It means," Leah said grimly, "my dad's about to walk into a political firestorm. And your family." She met Jamal's eyes. "You're right in the middle of it." The Rose Garden hummed with tension beneath its picturesque surface. Jamal stood between his parents on the temporary stage, squinting against the glare of dozens of camera flashes. The morning air carried the scent of freshly cut grass and something sharper, the electric anticipation of history being made. President Reynolds stepped to the podium, his expression grave. "My fellow Americans, we gather today at a crossroads." His voice carried strong and clear through the speakers, outlining the new Community Police Reconciliation Initiative with Marcus named as Senior Military Liaison. The plan was ambitious: joint training programs, federal oversight reforms, community review boards with real power. Then the president dropped the bombshell. "Effective immediately, I'm signing an executive order redirecting surplus military equipment from police departments to community development programs." A murmur rippled through the press corps. Jamal saw several reporters immediately start typing furiously on their phones. President Reynolds continued. "This equipment was meant to protect our streets, but too often it served only to widen the divide between law enforcement and the communities they serve. He turned slightly, gesturing to Marcus. Sergeant Carter understands this divide better than most, as both a decorated soldier and the father who stood up when the system failed his son. The applause was thunderous. Jamal caught sight of Leah standing off to the side with other staffers, giving him a subtle thumbs up. Then came the questions. "Mr. President," a reporter in the front row shouted. "Senator Clayton claims this initiative is an unconstitutional overreach. How do you respond?" The president's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'd remind the senator that the same Constitution he claims to defend also promises equal protection under the law, a promise we're still working to fulfill." Another reporter stood. "Sergeant Carter, are you concerned this appointment will be seen as political payback?" Marcus stepped forward, his posture rigid. "I'm a soldier, not a politician. My only concern is making sure no other parent has to watch their child be treated like mine was." The press conference might have ended there, a clean victory, if not for the sudden commotion at the back of the garden. A tall, silver-haired man in an impeccably tailored suit pushed through the crowd, flanked by aides. "Senator Clayton!" reporters shouted, swiveling their cameras. President Reynolds' jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Senator, we weren't expecting you." Clayton mounted the steps with the ease of a seasoned performer. "Mr. President, I couldn't let this moment pass without offering my perspective." Without waiting for an invitation, he leaned toward the microphones. "While we all condemn what happened to young Jamal here, dismantling police capabilities isn't the answer." The garden erupted into chaos, reporters shouting follow-ups, aides scrambling, cameras flashing. Jamal felt his mother's hand tighten around his. Then, cutting through the noise like a knife, Marcus's voice. "With respect, Senator, no one's talking about dismantling anything. We're talking about building trust, building relationships." Clayton turned his sharp gaze on Marcus. "Sergeant, surely you recognize the dangers of politicizing our military? Your presence here is exactly where it should be," President Reynolds interrupted, stepping between them. "This isn't about politics. It's about people." He placed a hand on Jamal's shoulder. "People like this young man here, who deserved better from the system we all serve." The standoff might have continued if not for Leah, who suddenly appeared at the edge of the stage holding up her tablet. Jamal could just make out the headline on the screen. "Breaking. National FOP endorses Carter initiative." Clayton's face went carefully blank. The police union support changed everything. President Reynolds seized the moment. "Thank you all for coming. We'll have more details in the days ahead." As they exited the stage, Jamal overheard Clayton mutter to an aide, "Get me everything you have on that sergeant." The word sent a chill down his spine. Their journey was far from over. The West Wing meeting room felt smaller than it was, the weight of the day pressing in from all sides. Jamal sat stiffly in an upholstered chair, watching as aides hurried in and out with papers and tablets. His parents were deep in conversation with White House staffers, their faces drawn with exhaustion. Leah slipped into the seat beside him, handing him a soda. "You holding up okay?" Jamal took the can, the condensation cool against his fingers. "I don't think I understood what we were walking into." "Yeah, well." Leah glanced toward where Senator Clayton was holding court with a group of reporters in the hallway. "Welcome to Washington." President Reynolds entered, followed by Chief of Staff Daniels. The room fell silent. "Sergeant Carter," the president said, "we need to talk damage control. Clayton's already spinning this as military overreach." Marcus straightened. "Sir, if my presence is complicating things." "No." The president cut him off. "You're exactly where I need you. But we have to move fast before the opposition hardens." He turned to his staff. "I want Sergeant Carter on every major network this week. Morning shows, Sunday political programs, the works." An aide nodded, typing furiously. "We'll need media training." "Not for me," Marcus said quietly. All eyes turned to him. "If you want this initiative to have real impact, it can't be about one soldier. We need community voices front and center." The president studied him for a long moment before nodding. "You're right, of course. But we still need you leading the charge." Jamal's phone buzzed. A text from Malik. "Dude, your dad just got in a fight with a senator on live TV." Asterisk below, it was a meme of Marcus photoshopped into a boxing ring with Clayton. Leah peeked at the screen and snorted. That's actually pretty good. Before Jamal could respond, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Raised voices. And, where is he? Where's Jamal? A familiar figure pushed past the Secret Service agents. Officer Ridley, his face flushed, a security badge dangling from his neck. Marcus was on his feet instantly. What the hell are you doing here? Ridley held up his hands. I came to help. He turned to Jamal. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want to make things right. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket. 5 years of internal complaints about excessive force in my department. Names, dates, everything. The room froze. Chief of Staff Daniels was the first to recover. Do you understand what you're handing us? Ridley nodded, his jaw set. The truth. President Reynolds took the drive, weighing it in his hand like it might explode. This could change everything. Or get you killed, Marcus added, eyeing Ridley. Why now? Ridley met his gaze. Because when you stood up for your son at that park, you showed me what real courage looks like. He turned to Jamal. And I realized, I either had to be part of the solution, or admit I was the problem. The silence stretched. Jamal studied the man who had humiliated him just days before, seeing the dark circles under his eyes, the tremor in his hands. This wasn't the swaggering cop from the park. This was someone who had reached his breaking point. President Reynolds pocketed the drive. We'll need to get you protective custody. Ridley shook his head. With respect, sir, I'll take my chances. But there's something else. He turned to Marcus. Let me testify. Put me in front of Congress, the press, whoever will listen. People need to hear how the system really works from someone who's been inside it. Jamal watched his father's face as he considered the offer. The anger was still there, but something else too. Recognition. Marcus extended his hand. Welcome to the fight. As they shook, Jamal felt the world shift beneath his feet. This wasn't just about him anymore, or even his family. It was about something much bigger. Outside, the sun dipped below the White House roof, casting long shadows across the lawn. Somewhere in the distance, protesters chanted. News helicopters circled. The real battle was just beginning. The safe house was nothing like Jamal expected. Instead of some dark basement, they'd been taken to a spacious Virginia home with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking wooded hills. The armed guards stationed at the gate were the only clue this wasn't just a wealthy family's retreat. Ridley sat hunched over the kitchen island, nursing a coffee while 2 Justice Department attorneys peppered him with questions. Jamal lingered in the doorway, listening as the former officer walked them through the flash drive's contents. Departmental cover-ups, manipulated evidence, a pattern of complaints swept under the rug. And this email chain shows the deputy chief ordering us to forget we ever saw the body cam footage from the Jenkins arrest, Ridley said, pointing to the laptop screen. One of the attorneys whistled low. This is bigger than we thought. Marcus entered from the patio, his phone pressed to his ear. Understood, sir. We'll be ready. He hung up, his expression grim. That was the Attorney General. They're convening a federal grand jury. Ridley paled. How long do I have before this goes public? 24 hours, maybe less. Marcus eyed him. Still sure you want to do this? Before Ridley could answer, Jamal spoke up. He's not doing it alone. All eyes turned to him. Marcus frowned. Jamal, if this is about what happened to me, then I should be part of it. Jamal met his father's gaze, channeling the same steady determination Marcus had taught him. You always say a soldier doesn't send others where he won't go himself. A strange look crossed Marcus's face, pride warring with protectiveness. After a long moment, he nodded. We'll do the press conference together. All of us. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly. The Justice Department briefing room was packed beyond capacity, cameras jostling for position. Jamal adjusted his tie, watching through a side door as reporters scrambled for seats. A hand touched his shoulder. Leah stood there, out of breath. Sorry I'm late. Had to shake my security detail. She held out a small box. Thought you might need these. Inside were a pair of silver cufflinks engraved with scales of justice. My grandfather wore these when he testified before Congress during Watergate, Leah said quietly. Figured they might bring you luck. Jamal swallowed hard. I can't take these. Consider it on loan. She grinned. Besides, every movement needs its symbols. The press conference began moments later. Attorney General Morales laid out the investigation first. Dry legal language that nonetheless sent reporters into a frenzy. Then it was their turn. Marcus spoke with military precision about accountability. Ridley gave a halting but devastating account of systemic corruption. And Jamal told the truth. About how it felt to be laughed at. About the heat of humiliation crawling up his neck. About watching his father stand tall when most would have broken. When he finished, the room was silent. Then, from the back, a single reporter began to clap. Others joined. Within seconds, the entire room was on its feet. Later, as they exited through a side door, Ridley pulled Jamal aside. However this ends, he said, his voice rough, I want you to know, you changed me. Jamal studied the man who had once been his tormentor, now his unlikely ally. We changed each other. The rain had stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds as their motorcade pulled away, bound for the next battle, the next city, the next step in a journey that began with a laugh in a park. Somewhere ahead, the future waited. The Capitol Rotunda echoed with the murmur of assembled politicians as Jamal followed his parents through the marble halls. Their footsteps clicked sharply against the stone floor, matching the quickened rhythm of his pulse. The congressional hearing room loomed ahead, its double doors flanked by stone-faced guards. Remember, Marcus murmured, adjusting his dress blues, we're here to educate, not antagonize. Jamal nodded, his fingers brushing against Leah's borrowed cufflinks in his pocket. The cool metal grounded him as they entered the chamber. The room was a semicircle of tiered desks, already filling with representatives. Camera crews lined the back wall, their red lights glowing like watchful eyes. At the center dais, Senator Clayton shuffled papers with deliberate calm. Sergeant Carter, Clayton said without looking up, so kind of you to join us. The hearing began with formalities, sworn oaths, procedural explanations. Then Clayton launched his first salvo. Sergeant, isn't it true this entire initiative stems from a personal vendetta? He held up a grainy photo of Marcus and Ridley shaking hands. You and a disgraced officer conspiring to undermine law enforcement nationwide? Marcus didn't flinch. Sir, with respect, this isn't about individuals. It's about ensuring no American. Answer the question, Clayton snapped. Across the aisle, Representative Torres, Democrat Texas, intervened. The witness should be allowed to finish his statement. The gavel banged. Order! Jamal watched the back and forth with growing unease. This wasn't debate, it was theater, and they'd walked right onto the stage. Then Clayton turned his sights on Jamal. Young man, he said with saccharine concern, has anyone pressured you to participate in this political charade? The room stilled. Marcus's hand twitched toward Jamal, but stopped. This was his fight now. Jamal met Clayton's gaze. No, sir. I'm here because what happened to me happens every day to kids who don't have cameras rolling or a special forces dad to back them up. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Clayton's smile tightened. And what exactly do you propose we do? Abandon law and order? No, sir. Jamal leaned into the microphone. Just the opposite. Real order comes from trust, something my dad learned overseas and something Officer Ridley learned the hard way. Clayton opened his mouth to retort when the chamber doors burst open. A breathless aide rushed to the senator's side, whispering urgently. Clayton's face drained of color. On the C-SPAN monitor, Jamal saw why. Fox News was breaking footage of a state trooper in Clayton's home state beating an unarmed teen. The video timestamp showed it occurred just that morning. Representative Torres stood slowly. I move we recess to review this new evidence and reconsider exactly whose side justice is on today. The gavel fell like a judge's sentence. This hearing is adjourned. As they exited, Marcus squeezed Jamal's shoulder. You held your ground. Outside, the afternoon sun baked the National Mall. Protesters' chants floated on the breeze. Jamal watched them, black and white, young and old, marching together toward a future still being written. His phone buzzed. Leah, Asterisk told you those cufflinks were lucky. Watch the 6 p.m. news, winky face asterisk. The revolution wouldn't be televised. It was already happening. The hotel suite smelled of stale pizza and nervous energy. Jamal sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by printouts of proposed legislation, while Leah paced like a caged tiger, her phone pressed to her ear. No, the language on page 47 needs to specify independent oversight, she snapped, then listened, rolling her eyes. Tell the senator if he wants military funding for his district, he'll stop watering down the accountability measures. She hung up with a growl. Politics. Marcus entered from the bedroom, his tie loosened. White House just called. The Fox News footage has gone mega-viral. 3 more states are launching investigations into their police departments. Jamal shuffled the papers. Does that help us? It changes the game, Marcus said. Now it's not just about one incident. It's about systemic reform. A knock at the door startled them all. Leah checked the peephole, then yanked it open. Ridley stood there, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. We need to talk. Marcus ushered him inside. You're supposed to be in protective custody. I was. Ridley dropped onto the couch. Then I got this. He tossed a burner phone onto the coffee table. The screen showed a single text. Traitors don't get retirement. Leah sucked in a breath. They found you. Some of my old buddies aren't too happy about me flipping. Ridley rubbed his face. But that's not why I'm here. He pulled a folded photograph from his pocket. Recognize this man? Jamal studied the grainy image. A police officer shaking hands with Senator Clayton at some fundraiser. Should I? That's Lieutenant Grady, head of my old precinct's internal affairs. Ridley tapped the photo. And according to my sources, he's been funneling dirty money to Clayton's campaigns for years. Marcus snatched the photo. You're saying Clayton's been protecting corrupt cops? Worse. Ridley leaned forward. I think he's been orchestrating it, stirring up racial tensions to scare voters into supporting his law and order agenda. The room fell silent. Jamal's stomach churned. This went so much deeper than he'd imagined. Leah was the first to move, grabbing her laptop. If we can prove this, we'd need irrefutable evidence, Marcus cautioned. Ridley smiled grimly. Good thing I know where Grady keeps his files. Jamal's pulse pounded in his ears. This wasn't just politics anymore. It was a conspiracy, and they were about to walk right into the heart of it. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Somewhere in the city, a siren wailed. Marcus finally nodded. We take this to the Attorney General. But carefully. As they gathered their things, Jamal caught Ridley's arm. Why risk this? Ridley met his gaze. Because I finally figured out what side I'm on. The city lights glittered outside the window, beautiful and treacherous. Somewhere out there, the truth waited, and they were coming for it. The parking garage beneath police headquarters was eerily silent at 3 a.m. Jamal crouched behind a concrete pillar, his heart hammering against his ribs as Ridley picked the lock on Lieutenant Grady's private office. The air smelled of motor oil and stale coffee. This is insane, Marcus whispered, his hand resting on Jamal's shoulder like he might yank him back at any moment. Ridley didn't look up from the lock. Insane would be walking in the front door. The lock clicked. We're just being creative. The office was smaller than Jamal expected. Just a cramped space with a dented filing cabinet and a desk buried under paperwork. Ridley went straight to the computer, inserting a thumb drive. Grady's old school. Keeps his dirty laundry on an encrypted drive, but... The screen flickered to life. Never changed his password from his badge number. Files began copying. Jamal watched the progress bar crawl, each percentage point ratcheting his anxiety higher. Somewhere above them, a door slammed. Footsteps echoed. Marcus stiffened. Someone's coming. Ridley yanked the drive free just as the doorknob rattled. They dove behind the desk as the door swung open. Polished shoes clicked against the tile. Through the gap beneath the desk, Jamal saw Lieutenant Grady himself pause, his head cocked like a dog catching a scent. The lieutenant's hand drifted toward his sidearm. Then, a crash from the hallway. Grady spun, drawing his weapon. "Who's there?" Silence.
After an eternity, Grady holstered his gun and left, locking the door behind him.
Ridley exhaled shakily. That was too close. Marcus checked his watch. "We have 18 minutes until shift change. Move."
Back in the garage, they sprinted for the exit. Jamal's lungs burned, but he pushed harder. The thumb drive clutched like a live grenade in his fist. They'd almost reached the car when floodlights blinded them. "Freeze!" Grady's voice boomed. "Hands where I can see them." Jamal squinted against the light. At least 6 officers had them surrounded, weapons drawn. Grady stepped forward, his smile venomous. "Dan Ridley, I always knew you'd come crawling back." He held out his hand. "The drive. Now." Marcus shifted subtly, putting himself between Jamal and the guns. "You're making a mistake, Lieutenant. The only mistake was thinking you people could come into my house and—" Sirens wailed. Tires screeched. A convoy of black SUVs screeched into the garage, doors flying open. Federal agents in tactical gear swarmed out, rifles raised. "DEA!" An agent shouted. "Everyone drop your weapons." Grady whirled. "This is a police matter." "Not anymore." Attorney General Morales emerged from the lead vehicle, holding up a warrant. "We've been investigating this precinct for months. Seems you just handed us probable cause on a silver platter." As Grady was cuffed, Ridley handed Morales the drive. "Everything you need is here. Names, dates, payments." Morales pocketed it. "You realize this implicates half the city government?" Marcus put an arm around Jamal. "Then I suggest you start making arrests." Dawn was breaking as they stepped outside. The first rays of sunlight painted the Capitol dome gold in the distance. Leah was waiting by the curb, grinning. "Told you I had a backup plan." She nodded to the federal agents. "Uncle Javier owes me for missing my quinceañera." Jamal laughed, the tension of the night finally breaking. Somewhere, Senator Clayton was waking up to a very bad day. And the fight? The fight was just getting started. The safe house windows rattled as another news helicopter circled overhead. Jamal sat at the kitchen table, watching the endless news coverage of Grady's arrest on the small television. The cheering at the bottom of the screen read, "Police corruption scandal rocks Capitol. Senator Clayton implicated." Marcus entered from the back bedroom, his phone pressed to his ear. "Understood, sir. We'll be ready." He hung up and rubbed his temples. "Attorney General wants us at the Justice Department by noon. They're moving forward with indictments." Jamal muted the TV. "Including Clayton?" "Including Clayton." Marcus sank into the chair across from him. "But it's not over. These kinds of powerful men don't go down without a fight." The front door opened, and Ridley stepped inside, carrying 2 paper bags that smelled of coffee and bacon. "Got breakfast. Also, we've got a problem." He dropped the bags on the table and pulled out his phone, showing them a news alert. "Breaking. Senator Clayton to hold press conference at 10 a.m. Sources say he will claim political persecution." Marcus groaned. Right on cue. Jamal unwrapped a breakfast sandwich, his appetite fading as he read the alert. "People will believe him, won't they?" "Some will," Ridley admitted, pouring coffee into 3 mugs. "But the evidence doesn't lie. Grady's already flipped. The money trail leads straight to Clayton's offshore accounts." The television screen changed to show a live shot of the Capitol building. Protesters on both sides crowded the steps, separated by barricades and police. Signs reading "Justice for All" clashed with "Stand with Law Enforcement." Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then stood abruptly. "We need to go. Now." "What's wrong?" Jamal asked, already grabbing his jacket. "Clayton's people are leaking to the press that Ridley's the real criminal here, saying he planted evidence to cover his own misconduct." Marcus headed for the door. "We're not safe here anymore." They piled into a nondescript sedan parked in the garage. Ridley took the wheel, his hand steady despite the tension in his jaw. "Where to?" "Justice Department," Marcus said. "We see this through to the end." The streets were eerily quiet as they drove downtown. Jamal watched the city pass by,
wondering how many people going about their morning routines had any idea what was unfolding behind the scenes. The Justice Department building loomed ahead, its neoclassical facade imposing. News vans crowded the perimeter, reporters doing live shots on the sidewalk. Ridley pulled into the underground garage, where two armed marshals stood waiting. "Sergeant Carter?" one asked. Marcus nodded, and they were ushered inside, through security checkpoints and into a private elevator. The Attorney General's conference room was already full when they entered. Federal prosecutors, FBI agents, and Justice Department staffers huddled around documents spread across the table. Attorney General Morales stood at the head, his sleeves rolled up, his expression grim. "Glad you're here," Morales said. "Clayton's about to go live. Thought you should see this." He gestured to a large monitor on the wall. The screen showed Senator Clayton standing at a podium outside the Capitol, flanked by uniformed police officers. His usual polished demeanor was replaced with righteous indignation. "My fellow Americans," Clayton began, "what we're witnessing today is nothing short of a coup against the brave men and women who keep our streets safe." Jamal tuned out the familiar rhetoric, watching instead the faces of the officers behind Clayton. Some looked determined, others uncomfortable. One, a young cop with a nervous tic, kept glancing off camera like he wanted to be anywhere else. These baseless accusations are the work of radical activists and a vengeful former officer with a documented history of. The door burst open. A young aide rushed in, breathless. "Sir, you need to see this." Morales muted Clayton's speech as the aide handed him a tablet. The Attorney General's eyebrows shot up. "Well, this changes things." He turned the tablet around. On the screen was a video timestamp from the previous night. Grady in his office, counting stacks of cash while talking on the phone. "Don't worry, Senator. The files on Ridley are fabricated. By the time anyone checks, the election will be over." The room erupted. Marcus grabbed Jamal's shoulder. "That's it. That's the smoking gun." Morales was already on his feet. "Get a warrant team to Clayton's office. I want every device seized before he can destroy evidence." As the team scrambled into action, Jamal watched the still-playing press conference on the monitor. Clayton was reaching his crescendo. "And so I say to those who would destroy our great nation from within, we see you, and we will not." A commotion off-camera interrupted him. The young cop who'd looked nervous earlier was now whispering urgently in Clayton's ear. The senator's face went pale. The camera kept rolling as he turned to his aides, hissing something before storming away from the podium. The news anchor's voice cut in, "This is extraordinary. Senator Clayton appears to have been informed of some development just as, yes, we're getting confirmation that federal agents have executed a search warrant at his Capitol office." The conference room erupted in cheers. Jamal found himself grinning, caught up in the moment. Ridley, however, remained solemn. "It's not over yet." Marcus nodded. "He'll fight every step. Appeals, delays, maybe even flee the country." Morales straightened his tie. "Which is why we move fast. Sergeant Carter, I'd like you and your family in protective custody until this plays out." Jamal looked at his father, then Ridley. However this ended, they'd see it through together. The screen showed Clayton's abandoned podium, the police officers now dispersing awkwardly. The American flag behind it fluttered in the breeze, its stars and stripes bright in the morning sun. Somewhere, justice was coming. The safe house provided by the Justice Department was larger than the last one. A modest brick home in a quiet Virginia suburb with an alarm system and black SUVs parked discreetly at both ends of the street. Jamal sat at the kitchen island, pushing scrambled eggs around his plate while the morning news played softly on the small television mounted in the corner. "Developments in the Clayton investigation continue to dominate headlines this morning," the anchor was saying. Sources confirm federal agents seized multiple electronic devices from the senator's residences late last night, while prosecutors convene a grand jury to consider charges ranging from bribery to obstruction of justice. Marcus entered from the backyard, his phone pressed to his ear. "Understood, sir. We'll be ready." He ended the call and sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Trouble?" Jamal asked. "Depends on your definition." Marcus poured himself a cup of coffee. "Attorney General wants us at the courthouse tomorrow. They're fast-tracking the case." Ridley came down the stairs, dressed in a crisp button-down shirt that looked borrowed. "Any word on Grady?" "Singing like a canary," Marcus said. Turns out Clayton wasn't his only connection. "This goes deep." Jamal watched the two men exchange a look. Former enemies turned reluctant allies in this unfolding drama. The past week had rewritten so many relationships, reshaped so many lives. His phone buzzed with another text from Leah, checking in. Even the first daughter had become an unexpected friend through all this. The television cut to footage of protesters outside the Capitol. Some demanded Clayton's immediate resignation. Others waved signs claiming it was all a political witch hunt. The division in the country had never felt more palpable. Marcus turned the volume down. "We need to talk about tomorrow." Ridley leaned against the counter. "They want us to testify?" "Not yet. But they want us visible. A show of solidarity when the charges are announced." Jamal set his fork down. "And then what?" "Then we see how far the rabbit hole goes." Marcus studied his son's face. "You understand what this means, don't you? However this ends, our lives won't go back to normal." The weight of that statement settled over the kitchen. Jamal thought about their old house, his school, the basketball court at the park where all this began. Would he ever shoot hoops there again without cameras following? Would they ever just be the Carter family instead of symbols of some national reckoning? Ridley cleared his throat. "There's something else you should know." He pulled out his phone and opened an encrypted email. "My old partner on the force reached out. Says Clayton's allies are getting desperate. There's talk of discrediting the key witnesses." Marcus's grip tightened around his coffee mug. Meaning they might come after Jamal. Use him to get to you. The eggs in Jamal's stomach turned to lead. He thought of the senator's cold eyes during the hearing. The way power like that didn't surrender without a fight. Marcus was already moving, pulling out his own phone. "We need more security. And I want." A sudden crash from the front of the house cut him off. All three froze as the distinct sound of shattering glass echoed through the rooms. Ridley reacted first, shoving Jamal to the floor behind the island just as the kitchen window exploded inward. A canister clattered across the tile, hissing thick white smoke. "Gas!" Ridley choked out, pulling his shirt over his mouth. Marcus yanked open a drawer, grabbing a kitchen knife just as black-clad figures burst through the smoke. Jamal caught glimpses of tactical gear, weapons, but no badges, no identification. The first attacker lunged at Marcus, who sidestepped and brought the knife handle down on the man's wrist with a sickening crack. A gun clattered to the floor. Ridley scooped it up, firing 2 warning shots into the ceiling. "Federal agents!" he shouted. "Identify yourselves!" No response, just more figures emerging from the smoke. Jamal crawled toward the back door, his eyes burning, lungs screaming for clean air. He could hear the struggle behind him. Grunts, the thud of bodies hitting walls. His fingers found the doorknob just as a gloved hand grabbed his collar, yanking him backward. Jamal lashed out blindly, his elbow connecting with something solid. The grip loosened and he stumbled forward, bursting out into the backyard. The cool morning air was a shock to his searing lungs. He turned back toward the house, terrified for his father, when motion caught his eye. Another intruder coming around the side of the house, weapon drawn. Jamal dove behind a patio table as the first shot rang out. The glass top shattered above him. He scrambled backward, searching desperately for anything to defend himself with. Then, sirens. Multiple vehicles screeching to a halt out front. Shouts of FBI. "Drop your weapons." The shooter hesitated, then turned and sprinted for the back fence. Jamal didn't breathe again until he heard the distinct sound of agents breaching the house. Minutes later, Marcus and Ridley emerged, coughing but alive, flanked by federal agents. Marcus's shirt was torn, his knuckles bloody, but his eyes found Jamal immediately. "You hurt." Jamal shook his head, still trembling from adrenaline. "Who were they?" An agent stepped forward, his face grim. "Contractors. Ex-military by the look of them. We'll know more when we process the scene." Marcus pulled Jamal into a fierce hug, then turned to the agent. "They knew exactly where to find us." The implication hung heavy in the air. Someone had betrayed them. Someone with access. As the agent secured the perimeter,
Jamal noticed Ridley staring at something in his hand. A silver badge one of the attackers must have dropped. Not police. Not government. Private security. The kind only the very rich and very powerful could afford. The kind Senator Clayton had access to. The war had just gotten personal. The safe house attack left them scattered. Jamal found himself whisked away in an armored SUV to an undisclosed military base while Marcus and Ridley were taken separately for debriefing. The base was a sprawling complex of nondescript buildings surrounded by razor wire and armed guards. A stern-faced female lieutenant showed Jamal to a sparse dormitory room with a single bed, a desk, and no windows. "Someone will bring you dinner," she said. "Do not leave this room." Alone, Jamal sat on the edge of the bed, his hands still shaking. The attack had happened so fast. The smoke, the shouts, the gunfire. He replayed every second in his mind, wondering if he could have done something differently. Wondering where his father was now. A knock at the door startled him. He expected an MRE or maybe another officer, but instead Leah slipped inside, her usual crisp White House demeanor replaced by rumpled clothes and dark circles under her eyes. "You okay?" she asked, closing the door softly behind her. Jamal exhaled in relief. "Been better. What are you doing here?" "My dad pulled strings." She sat beside him, dropping a backpack on the floor. "Brought you some stuff. Clothes, snacks, burner phone." The normalcy of the gesture almost made Jamal laugh. "Thanks. Any word on my dad?" Leah's expression darkened. "He's safe, but there's complications." "What kind?" "The kind involving Senate Intelligence Committee emergency hearings." She lowered her voice. "Those weren't just random mercenaries who attacked you. 2 of them were former private contractors with ties to Clayton's biggest donor." Jamal's stomach twisted. "So it was a hit? An extraction, more likely." Leah pulled out her tablet and showed him security footage from the safe house. Black-clad figures carrying what looked like evidence bags. "They weren't just after you. They were after Ridley's files." The implications settled over Jamal like a weight. If Clayton was willing to go this far to cover his tracks. Leah's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then stood abruptly. "We need to move. Now." "What? Why?" "Because my dad just got word. Clayton's invoking executive privilege on some 1980s-era technicality. The AG can't touch his classified documents without Senate approval." She shoved the tablet into her bag, which means whatever dirt they were trying to steal from Ridley is about to get locked away forever. Jamal grabbed the backpack. "So what do we do?" Leah's grin was all teeth. "We beat them to it." She led him through a maze of corridors, using her White House credentials to bypass checkpoints. They emerged in a parking garage where a nondescript sedan idled. Ridley sat behind the wheel, his arm in a sling, his face bruised but determined. "Get in," he said. "We've got about 15 minutes before they realize you're gone." As they sped away from the base, Jamal's mind raced. "Where are we going?" "The one place Clayton can't shield with privilege," Ridley said. "His summer home." Leah turned in her seat. "While Clayton's been playing political games, his wife has been quietly divorcing him. Our sources say she's been copying files for months. Insurance against him cutting her out of the money." Jamal tried to process this new twist. "And she'll just hand them over?" Ridley's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "Not exactly." The car accelerated onto the highway, heading north as the sun dipped below the horizon. Somewhere ahead lay answers, and dangers none of them could fully anticipate. But as Jamal watched the mile markers flash by, one truth became clear. This was no longer just about a confrontation in a park. It was about survival. The tires crunched over gravel as Ridley killed the headlights and coasted to a stop beneath towering pine trees. Clayton's summer compound loomed ahead, a sprawling Adirondack-style lodge nestled against a dark lake, its windows mostly dark except for a soft glow from the rear deck. Leah checked her phone. Security detail is down to 2 agents while the divorce plays out. They patrol the perimeter every 20 minutes. Jamal peered through the trees, his pulse pounding in his ears. "This is insane. We're breaking into a senator's house." "Borrowing," Ridley corrected, pulling a small device from his jacket. "This will jam their cameras for 90 seconds. Long enough to get to the boathouse." He pointed to a shadowy structure at the water's edge. Mrs. Clayton's been storing the files there, somewhere her husband never goes. Leah checked her watch. Next patrol passes in 3 minutes. We move fast. They slipped from the car, the forest floor damp beneath their sneakers. Jamal's every instinct screamed this was a mistake, but the image of those masked men bursting into the safe house propelled him forward. The boathouse door was locked, but Ridley made quick work of it with a set of picks. Inside smelled of mildew and motor oil. Moonlight filtered through dusty windows, revealing stacks of boxes labeled Christmas decorations and summer linens. Leah went straight to a large trunk in the corner. "Help me with this." The trunk contained neatly organized binders. Jamal flipped one open, bank statements, offshore account numbers, and most damningly, a handwritten ledger detailing payments from LG to JC with dates going back years. "Lieutenant Grady to Senator Clayton," Ridley breathed. "This is it. The whole money trail." A sudden noise outside froze them. Footsteps on the dock. Leah snapped photos with her phone while Ridley crept to the window. "Security guard. Keep working." Jamal's hands shook as he helped photograph page after page. The evidence was overwhelming. Not just bribes, but instructions for Grady to instigate incidents that would make Clayton's tough-on-crime rhetoric play better during elections. A floorboard creaked outside. Ridley drew his weapon. "Time's up." They barely had time to close the trunk before the door burst open. Not a security guard. A woman in her 50s, well-dressed, holding a pistol with practiced ease. "Mrs. Clayton. I knew someone would come eventually," she said, her voice steady. "Just didn't expect children." Leah stepped forward. "We're here for the truth. And what will you do with it?" The senator's wife eyed them coldly. "Ruining him ruins me too." Jamal surprised himself by speaking. "He sent men to kill my family." Something flickered in Mrs. Clayton's eyes. She lowered the gun slightly. "I suppose he did." A tense silence stretched. Somewhere on the property, a radio crackled. Security checking in. Finally, Mrs. Clayton sighed. "Take what you need. But know this. My husband doesn't surrender. He'll burn everything down before admitting defeat." Leah held up her phone. "Not if we release this first." As they slipped back into the night, Jamal glanced back at the lonely figure in the boathouse doorway. The real casualties in this war, he realized, weren't just those in the crossfire, but those trapped in the blast radius of powerful men's sins. The car ride back was silent, each lost in their own thoughts. The files on Leah's phone represented more than evidence. They were a detonator. And the countdown had begun. The pre-dawn light filtered through the blinds of the FBI field office where Jamal, Ridley, and Leah waited in tense silence. The air smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. Jamal rubbed his tired eyes, the adrenaline from their late-night excursion still coursing through his veins. Marcus burst through the door, his dress uniform wrinkled, his face etched with equal parts fury and relief. "Are you all out of your damn minds?" Leah stood her ground. "We got the evidence." She held up her phone. "Everything we need to bury Clayton." Marcus turned to Jamal, his expression unreadable. "You could have been killed." Jamal met his father's gaze. "We had to do something." Before Marcus could respond, the door opened again. Attorney General Morales entered, flanked by 2 federal prosecutors. His normally impeccable suit was rumpled, his tie loose. "Do you have any idea what you've unleashed?" Morales demanded, though his eyes betrayed a glint of admiration. Leah projected the files onto a monitor. Bank transfers, encrypted emails, even audio recordings of Clayton directing Grady to manufacture crises. The evidence was irrefutable. Morales exhaled sharply. "This changes everything. But we have to move carefully. If we..." His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then paled. Clayton's called an emergency press conference. The television in the corner flickered to life. Senator Clayton stood at a podium outside his Georgetown home, his usual polished demeanor replaced by something more dangerous, a cornered animal's desperation. "My fellow Americans," he began, his voice dripping with false sincerity, "what you're about to hear will shock you." Jamal's stomach dropped. Whatever Clayton was about to do, it wouldn't be surrender. The senator held up a thick envelope.
These documents, obtained legally, prove that Sergeant Marcus Carter and disgraced Officer Daniel Ridley have been conspiring with foreign actors to undermine our nation's law enforcement. The room erupted in protests. Jamal stared in disbelief as Clayton spun their evidence into an elaborate conspiracy theory, complete with doctored documents showing supposed communications with Russian intelligence. "He's flipping the script," Leah whispered, horrified. Marcus grabbed the remote, muting the television. "We need to respond. Now." Morales was already dialing. "I'll get the White House press secretary on standby." Ridley paced like a caged tiger. "It won't matter. By the time we refute this, the damage will be done. Half the country will believe his version." Jamal watched the muted footage, the reporters scrambling, the pundits already dissecting Clayton's claims on the Chiron below. The truth was losing before the fight even began. Then an idea struck him. "What if we don't play his game?" Jamal asked quietly. All eyes turned to him. Leah tilted her head. "What do you mean?" Jamal pointed to one of the audio files on Leah's phone, a particularly damning recording of Clayton instructing Grady to make sure those protesters get violent before an election. "We don't debate. We just release everything. All at once. Let people hear it straight from him." A slow smile spread across Leah's face. "Flood the zone." Morales hesitated. "That's highly irregular." "It's war," Marcus cut in. "And my son's right." Within minutes, the decision was made. Leah coordinated with White House digital staff while Morales prepared an official Justice Department statement. Ridley and Marcus reviewed the most explosive pieces of evidence. Jamal watched as they prepared to detonate the truth bomb that would shatter Clayton's carefully constructed lies. As the clock struck 8 a.m., it began. The recordings, the documents, the bank statements all released simultaneously across every major news platform and social media. No spin. No commentary. Just the unfiltered evidence. The response was instantaneous. News networks scrambled to adjust their coverage. Twitter exploded. Within minutes, #ClaytonTapes was trending globally. Marcus put a hand on Jamal's shoulder as they watched the fallout unfold. Clayton's press conference had turned into a feeding frenzy. Reporters shouting questions about the damning evidence contradicting his claims. The senator's face on screen went from smug to panicked as he realized the tide had turned. "You did this," Marcus said quietly. Jamal shook his head. "We all did." Outside, the morning sun rose over a city and a country, forever changed by the truth. The Justice Department briefing room buzzed with an electric tension as Jamal sat between his father and Ridley at the long witness table. Camera flashes popped like fireworks, momentarily blinding him each time he glanced up at the packed room. Reporters leaned forward in their seats, recorders outstretched, while congressional staffers lined the walls, their whispered conversations creating a constant low hum beneath the official proceedings. Attorney General Morales adjusted the microphone at the center podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence you're about to see leaves no room for doubt. What began as an investigation into police misconduct has uncovered a systemic corruption scheme reaching the highest levels of government." A screen behind him lit up with the first document. A bank transfer slip showing $250,000 moving from one of Clayton's PACs to an offshore account labeled only with numbers. "Exhibit A," Morales continued. One of 17 such payments made over 3 years to shell companies ultimately controlled by Lieutenant Grady. Jamal studied the faces in the crowd as the evidence unfolded. Some looked shocked, others grimly satisfied. A few, likely Clayton allies, scowled at their notebooks, already crafting spin. The hearing stretched through the morning, each new revelation more damning than the last. Audio clips played of Clayton directing Grady to make sure the crime stats look bad before the election, and find me another incident like that park confrontation to run ads against. When it came time for testimony, Marcus spoke first, his military bearing and measured words lending undeniable credibility. "I swore an oath to defend this country from all enemies, foreign and domestic," he said, his voice carrying through the silent room. "What we've uncovered here is as dangerous as any foreign threat, a betrayal of public trust at the highest levels." Ridley's turn came next. The former officer's hands shook slightly as he recounted how the corruption had infected his precinct, how speaking up earlier would have gotten him killed or discredited. Then, unexpectedly, the committee chair turned to Jamal. "Mr. Carter," the elderly senator said gently, "you've been at the center of this from the beginning. What would you like these proceedings to achieve? Every eye in the room locked onto Jamal. His mouth went dry. He glanced at his father, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Jamal cleared his throat. It's not about revenge, or even just punishment. He paused, choosing his words carefully. That day in the park, when Officer Ridley laughed at me, what hurt most wasn't the disrespect. It was realizing people like him, people with power, got to decide what was true. He looked around the room, making eye contact with as many people as he could. I just want the truth to matter again. The silence that followed felt heavier than applause. Even the reporters stopped typing momentarily. The hearing concluded with the committee voting unanimously to send the evidence to the full Senate with a recommendation for expulsion and criminal prosecution. As they filed out, Jamal noticed a familiar face in the back. Leah, giving him a subtle thumbs up from behind a cluster of Justice Department staffers. Outside the hearing room, chaos reigned. Reporters shouted questions, protesters waved signs, and a phalanx of security held back the growing crowd. Marcus guided Jamal through the scrum toward a waiting car. We're done for today. Let the process work now. But as they reached the vehicle, a commotion erupted behind them. Shouts, screams, the sudden pop-pop-pop of gunfire. Jamal felt himself being shoved to the pavement. His father's body covering his as security detail formed a human shield around them. When the all-clear came minutes later, the scene was pandemonium, a shooter in custody, 2 injured bystanders being loaded into ambulances, and reporters already broadcasting live about assassination attempt at Capitol. Marcus helped Jamal up, his hands gripping his son's shoulders tightly. You okay? Jamal nodded, though his legs felt unsteady. Who was it? One of the agents answered grimly. Former cop, Grady's brother-in-law. As they sped away from the Capitol, Jamal watched the flashing lights recede in the rear window. The attack would dominate the news cycle, overshadow the hearing, maybe even galvanize Clayton's remaining supporters. But the evidence remained. The truth remained. And for the first time, Jamal understood this wasn't an ending. Just another battle in a war that would outlast them all. The car merged onto the highway, carrying them toward whatever came next. The safe house was different this time. A nondescript apartment in a high-rise building with a view of the Potomac. Jamal stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the river snake through the city as the sun dipped below the horizon. The glass reflected his exhausted face back at him, dark circles under his eyes from too many sleepless nights. Behind him, Marcus and Ridley huddled around the kitchen table with 2 FBI agents, poring over security footage from the shooting. The low murmur of their voices blended with the hum of the air conditioning. They knew we'd be there, Marcus said, tapping the screen. That wasn't random. One of the agents, a woman with a tight bun and sharper cheekbones, nodded. We're tracking the shooter's communications. Preliminary evidence suggests he was in contact with someone close to Clayton. Jamal turned from the window. Will that be enough to tie it back to him? The agents exchanged a glance. The man answered first. Unlikely. These guys are good at insulation. The apartment door opened, and Leah walked in carrying 2 paper bags that smelled of Chinese food. Her usual polished appearance was replaced by jeans and a wrinkled blouse, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Sorry it took so long, she said, dropping the bags on the counter. Had to shake a reporter. They ate in relative silence, the weight of the day pressing down on them. Jamal picked at his low mane, his appetite gone. The image of those gun flashes kept replaying in his mind. Leah's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then sat up straighter. They're voting. What? Marcus asked. Senate expulsion. It's happening now. She turned her phone around to show the C-SPAN feed. Senators filing into the chamber for an emergency session. The group gathered around the television as the proceedings began. The Senate Majority Leader took the floor, his voice grave. The evidence before us leaves no doubt as to the severity of these offenses, he said. Therefore, I move for immediate expulsion of the junior senator from. Chaos erupted. Senators shouted over each other. A handful of Clayton's allies protested loudly, calling it a witch hunt. The camera panned to Clayton himself, sitting stone-faced in the back row, his usual smirk replaced by a grim line. Then something unexpected happened.
Senator Elizabeth Warren crossed the aisle to stand beside Senator Ted Cruz. Political opposites united in this moment. One by one, others joined them, Republicans and Democrats alike forming an impromptu coalition. The vote was called. The tally ran. When the final numbers displayed on screen, 92-8 in favor of expulsion, the room erupted. Clayton stood abruptly, his face purple with rage, before storming out, followed by his few remaining allies. Leah let out a breath. Wow! Marcus shook his head. It's not over. He'll still face criminal charges. And his supporters. They'll be angry, Ridley finished. Jamal watched as the news cut to footage of protests already forming outside Capitol buildings in multiple states. Some celebrating Clayton's downfall, others decrying it as a deep state coup. The division in the country had never felt more visceral. His phone buzzed with a text from Malik. Asterisk, dude, you are famous. They're talking about you on every channel. Asterisk. Jamal didn't respond. He wasn't sure how to explain that fame felt more like a target than an achievement. Marcus put a hand on his shoulder. You did good, son. Did we? Jamal gestured to the screen, where split footage showed both celebrations and riots. Look at what's happening. Marcus followed his gaze. Change isn't pretty. It's messy and loud and sometimes violent. But that doesn't mean it's not worth doing. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars fallen to earth. Somewhere out there, Clayton was regrouping, his supporters were raging, and the next chapter of this battle was already being written. But for tonight, at least, justice had won around. Jamal took a deep breath and turned away from the window. The first snow of winter dusted Washington as Jamal stood at the Lincoln Memorial, his breath fogging in the crisp morning air. Tourists milled about, snapping photos, completely unaware of the young man at the center of the nation's biggest political firestorm. A familiar voice spoke beside him. They never look at his hands, do they? Jamal turned to find Leah bundled in a thick pea coat, her cheeks pink from the cold. She nodded toward the massive marble statue. Look closely. Lincoln's hands are making sign language letters. A and L. Some say it's for his initials. Others think it's a tribute to a deaf child he knew. She smiled. History's full of hidden stories. Jamal studied the sculpture with new eyes. Like how this whole thing started with a cop laughing at me. Leah's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then sighed. Speaking of, Clayton's surrender negotiations fell apart. He's demanding a public trial. Jamal's stomach tightened. He wants a platform and a delay tactic. Trials take months. Gives his allies time to regroup. Leah pocketed her phone. My dad wants to know if you're willing to testify when it happens. The weight of that question settled over Jamal. More cameras. More scrutiny. More nights wondering if some fanatic would take a shot at him or his family. Before he could answer, his own phone rang. An unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Jamal Carter? A woman's voice. Professional. This is Principal Hendricks at Arlington Prep. We've been asked to provide you with enrollment options given your unique circumstances. Leah raised an eyebrow as Jamal blinked in surprise. Arlington Prep was one of the most exclusive private schools in D.C. The president suggested you might appreciate the security our campus provides, the principal continued. We'd be honored to have you. When the call ended, Jamal stared at the phone. Did you? Leah grinned. I may have mentioned you needed a safer school option. They walked down the memorial steps, the winter sun glinting off the reflecting pool. Jamal tried to imagine attending some fancy prep school, eating lunch in cafeterias with kids who'd never been laughed at by cops or had their homes shot up. It's a fresh start, Leah said softly. Jamal watched a group of school children laughing as they tried to catch snowflakes on their tongues. A normal childhood, something he hadn't realized he'd lost until this moment. Will it ever really be over? He asked. Leah followed his gaze to where news vans were setting up near the Washington Monument, probably covering Clayton's latest outburst. No, she said honestly. But that doesn't mean you don't get to live your life. They walked in silence for a while, the crunch of snow underfoot. Eventually, Leah stopped near a bench. I have to ask, are you ready for what comes next? The trial, the media, all of it.
Jamal looked back at Lincoln's solemn face gazing across the mall. He thought of his father's quiet strength, of Ridley's redemption, of all the kids who'd never have to face what he had because of this fight. "Yeah," he said finally. "I'm ready." The snow began falling harder as they walked toward the waiting car, flakes catching in their hair like tiny stars. Somewhere ahead lay courtrooms and classrooms, battles and books. But for now, in this quiet moment between storms, there was just the crunch of snow and the promise of tomorrow. The first day of Senator Clayton's trial dawned gray and frigid. Jamal stood with his father on the steps of the federal courthouse, their breath visible in the cold air as a sea of reporters shouted questions. Camera flashes popped like fireworks, momentarily blinding him with each step forward. Marcus leaned close. "Stay with me." Inside, the courtroom was all polished wood and hushed whispers. Jamal took his seat behind the prosecution table, noticing how Clayton entered with the same swagger he'd always had, as if expulsion and indictment were mere inconveniences. The former senator even winked at one of the reporters before taking his place at the defense table. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, called the court to order. "Before we begin," she said, peering over her glasses, "I want to make something clear. This is a court of law, not a circus. Any attempts to turn these proceedings into a media spectacle will be dealt with harshly." Jamal could have sworn her gaze lingered on Clayton as she spoke. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. Bank records, wiretaps, Grady's testimony connecting Clayton to the corruption scheme. Then came the surprise witness, Mrs. Clayton. The courtroom gasped as she took the stand. Clayton's smug expression faltered for the first time. His wife testified calmly about offshore accounts, secret meetings, and the night she discovered recordings of her husband conspiring with police officials. When the prosecution played one such recording, Clayton ordering Grady to make sure those protesters looked violent, even the jury members sat forward in their seats. Cross-examination was brutal. Clayton's attorney tried painting Mrs. Clayton as a scorned woman seeking revenge, but she never wavered. "My husband betrayed his oath," she said coolly. "That has nothing to do with our marriage." The trial stretched through the week. Jamal watched it all from the front row, absorbing every detail. On Thursday, the prosecution called their final witness, Marcus. His father took the stand with quiet dignity, recounting the park incident and everything that followed. When asked about the attack on their safe house, Marcus's voice hardened. "That wasn't just an attack on my family. It was an attack on the rule of law itself." Clayton's attorney objected repeatedly, but the damage was done. Jamal could see it in the jurors' faces. They believed Marcus. Then came the bombshell. During redirect, the prosecutor asked Marcus one final question. "Sergeant Carter, is there anything else you'd like the court to know?" Marcus paused, then reached into his jacket pocket. "Just this." He produced a small silver badge, the one Jamal had seen Ridley recover from their attackers. This belonged to a private security contractor killed during the safe house raid. His employer? A firm owned by Senator Clayton's largest donor. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged her gavel. Clayton's face went sheet white. When Jamal glanced at the jury, he saw their verdict written in their stunned expressions long before it was officially rendered. Justice, it seemed, had finally arrived. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Jamal spent the time wandering Arlington Prep's hallways, trying to focus on algebra and history instead of the trial. His new classmates stole glances but kept their distance. Whether out of respect or discomfort, he couldn't tell. On the morning of the verdict, security was tighter than ever at the courthouse. Barricades held back crowds of protesters and supporters. Jamal spotted signs reading justice for Clayton alongside "Lock him up." The division in the country hadn't healed. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Clayton sat ramrod straight at the defense table, his expensive suit perfectly pressed, but Jamal noticed the nervous tap of his fingers against the wood. The judge entered. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreman stood. "We have, Your Honor." A hush fell over the courtroom as the clerk read the verdict form. On count 1, conspiracy to commit bribery, guilty. A collective gasp. Clayton didn't react. On count 2, obstruction of justice, guilty. One by one, all 14 counts rang out the same. Guilty, guilty, guilty. When the judge ordered Clayton remanded into custody immediately, His carefully constructed facade finally cracked. "This is a travesty," he shouted as marshals handcuffed him. "I'll appeal this." The judge banged her gavel. "Save it for sentencing, Mr. Clayton." As they led him away, Clayton locked eyes with Jamal for one searing moment, pure, unfiltered hatred burning beneath the panic. Then he was gone, swallowed up by the system he'd manipulated for so long. Outside, the protests turned violent. News helicopters circled overhead as police in riot gear struggled to contain the chaos. Jamal and his father were whisked away through underground tunnels to a waiting SUV. Marcus exhaled sharply as the car pulled away. It's over. But Jamal knew better. He watched through the tinted windows as a newsstand flashed headlines about Clayton's allies already planning appeals, about pundits questioning the verdict, about the deep divides the trial had exposed. This wasn't over. It might never be. That night, as Jamal lay in bed at their new DC apartment, his phone buzzed with a text from Leah. "You okay?" He stared at the ceiling, thinking about the park, the safe house, the courtroom, thinking about how one moment could spiral into something so much bigger than himself. "Yeah," he replied finally, "just thinking about what comes next." Her response came quickly. "Whatever you want it to be." Jamal set the phone down. For the first time in months, the future stretched before him, not as something to survive, but something to shape. Outside, the city hummed with its endless rhythms. Somewhere, Clayton sat in a jail cell. Somewhere, new battles were already brewing. But here, in this quiet moment, Jamal Carter was just a kid with his whole life ahead of him. And that was enough. The cherry blossoms were in full bloom along the tidal basin when Jamal received the invitation to the White House. Not for another press conference or policy meeting, but for something simpler. A barbecue. The South Lawn buzzed with laughter and conversation as Jamal made his way through the crowd. Senators mixed with veterans, activists chatted with police reformers, all under the warm spring sun. Leah spotted him first, waving him over to where Marcus and Ridley stood near the grill with President Reynolds himself. "Look who finally showed up," Leah teased, handing Jamal a soda. "Prep school keeping you too busy?" Jamal rolled his eyes but smiled. Arlington had been an adjustment. The uniforms, the Latin mottos, the kids who'd never known a food desert or a police stop, but it was growing on him. President Reynolds flipped a burger with surprising skill. "How's the new task force looking, Sergeant?" Marcus wiped his hands on a napkin. "Making progress, sir. 6 cities implementing the new training protocols so far." "And you, Officer Ridley?" the president asked. Ridley, now working with Marcus on police-military relations, shrugged. "Baby steps, but the right direction." Jamal wandered toward the edge of the party where a familiar face stood gazing at the Washington Monument. "Mrs. Clayton." "You came," he said, surprised. She turned, her smile tinged with sadness. "My husband's mistakes shouldn't mean I stopped trying to make things right." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before she added, "He got 12 years, you know." Appealing, of course. Jamal nodded. The sentence had dominated the news for days. "Are you okay?" Mrs. Clayton studied the horizon. "Funny thing about truth. Once you see it, you can't unsee it." She patted his arm. "Don't waste your moment in the light, Jamal." As she walked away, Leah appeared at his side. "Come on. There's someone you should meet." She led him to a group of teenagers clustered near the dessert table. "These are the leaders of next year's Youth Police Accountability Project," Leah said. A girl with braids and a nose ring grinned. "We're designing an app to document police interactions. Heard you might have some insights." Jamal blinked. "Me? You're kind of the expert on what not to do," another kid joked. As they peppered him with questions about the park, the trial, what changes would have actually helped, Jamal realized something with startling clarity. This was why it had all happened. Not for the headlines or the verdict, but for moments like this, where pain turned into progress, where experience became someone else's lesson. Later, as fireworks lit up the DC sky, Marcus found his son watching the colors reflect off the Lincoln Memorial. "Proud of you," Marcus said simply. Jamal leaned into his father's side, just like he had as a kid. "We did it together." The last firework burst in a shower of gold, illuminating the city in a warm glow. Somewhere, new battles waited, new challenges, new moments that would test them. But tonight? Tonight was for celebration.